Like most of you, I've been overwhelmed and saddened over the last 2 weeks with the flood of news reports of the horrific attack on Israel by Hamas and Hezbollah, to include the demonstrations all over the world from both sides of this conflict. Before making any assessment of a situation, I look at the facts. And given that this is such a complex situation, I had to fall back to my law enforcement training, specifically report writing. When a law enforcement officer completes an arrest report or an incident report or probable cause declaration, there are 6 components that have to be addressed. Well, there's actually 5. The 6th one is what we're trying to deduce from the other 5 components. These 5 are who, what, where, when, and how. The 6th component is why. And this is the most important component, and in a court of law, it often leads to the determination of guilt or innocence. And in this episode of Office of the Patriot, it will lead us to the truth. Hello, and welcome to the Office of the Patriot. In this office, I try to make sense out of the nonsense of the progressive left. If you are a subscriber, thank you for your continued viewership. It is appreciated. If you are a returning viewer, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future presentations. And if you are a first-time visitor to my channel, well, congratulations on finding it. It's usually impossible to find thanks to the YouTube algorithm. However, I do hope you find the content worth coming back for. My name is Myron Ybarra, and I'm your host. Some of you might have caught that this is episode 67, but my last episode was 65. Yes, I skipped 66. I just couldn't bring myself to give this episode that numerical title in light of the Christian implication that number signifies. And although I may fall short of being a good Christian, that doesn't mean I don't try to be. So, let's go over the components of an incident report again so we can apply them to the facts that started this conflict. The first is who, and who is pretty easy to address. That would be the Israelis and Hamas. However, we also have new actors in this conflict. We have Hezbollah, Lebanon, Egypt, Iran, and now it looks like Turkey is getting involved. These new actors paint a new picture of this war, and we'll get into that in a bit, so stay with me. The next component is what, and this is the action of this incident. In this case, the action is Hamas instituted a coordinated strike on Israel targeting unarmed and defenseless civilians. We'll also get into Hamas's reason for doing this later. Where, when, and how are also pretty self-explanatory. Virtually all areas of Israel's borders and larger cities were targeted with rockets, coupled with a coordinated attack by Hamas terrorist ground forces that moved from village to village, targeting unarmed civilians, killing some, and taking others hostage. This happened on Saturday, October 7th, 2023, and continues today. Now that we have the basics covered, let's use this information to deduce the why. Israel has been and is one of the most volatile regions in the world. This little country, that's roughly the size of New Jersey, has suffered the constant onslaught of war for over a millennia. This area that borders the Mediterranean Sea to the west and the Dead Sea and Jordan to the east has been conquered and or occupied by Hebrews, Persians, Arabs, Turks, Egyptians, various Islamic groups, and even the British. I'm sure I missed a few, but you can see that this area has always been a volatile region. You remember, we spoke about who was involved in this war, originally involved in this war, right? It was Hamas and Israel. However, shortly after the conflict started, other Arab states and terrorist groups became involved in this conflict on the side of Hamas, which I found strange given the reasons the Palestinians claimed they started this war. They said it was to be free of Israel's subjugation and to reclaim land for the Palestinian people. So why would other Arab nations side with a known terrorist organization like Hamas to destroy Israel when the Palestinians have claimed this conflict is because of land and the alleged subjugation of Palestinians? Now, don't mind the fact that Israel pulled out of Gaza and the West Bank completely in 2005 and gave total autonomy to the Palestinians in Gaza to determine their own future. Israel also did the same thing in the West Bank. The Palestinians claim that Israel is their land and they have been subjugated by the Israelis, specifically Jews, while living in Gaza. They claim that they are merely trying to recover their land as they believe it is their birthright. If that were all true, then all of the prior peace accords, like the Oslo Accords, that afforded Palestinians not only land, but the right to self-govern, would have been enough. Also, given that no other Arab state has made any claim that Israel, or rather the land that Israel sits on, is in fact their land, means that there has to be some other reason for their involvement. And in the case of Gaza and the West Bank, they were originally territories of Egypt and Jordan. However, they were annexed by Israel after the Six-Day War in 1967 and ultimately given to the Palestinians, although some of the land was returned to Egypt and Jordan as well. Also, none of these countries have offered any economic or humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in Gaza prior to or as a result of this conflict. In fact, all of the neighboring Arab nations have closed their borders to Palestinian refugees, but they seem to have injected themselves militarily into this conflict against Israel. So, what's the reason for this war if it's not for land or freedom? I believe the reason for this war is nothing more than hate. Hate that has been fostered by centuries of learned behavior validated by specific Islamic dogma. A significant component of Muslims in the Arab nations, and all over the world for that matter, hate the Jewish people and in many cases want them exterminated. Now, this kind of behavior is nothing new to human beings. Truth be told, every religion has components in their religious script that justifies punishment and even killing. Our own criminal justice system is based on the concept of retribution. The Latin phrase lex talionis, which is the premise of our criminal justice system, means an eye for an eye. For as long as religion has been guiding the ethics and morals of man, we've used God as the justification to commit violence and in some cases sin against another man. In the Bible, Luke 19 verse 27, "But as for these enemies of mine who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them before me." In the Quran, Surah 9 verse 5, "Then kill the disbelievers, non-Muslims, wherever you find them, capture them and besiege them, and lie in wait for them in each and every ambush." Violence, especially violence supported by righteous indignation, is exceptionally easy to embrace when all you've been taught is that everybody who doesn't believe the way you believe is evil and wrong and full of sin. Now, you have a duty to exterminate them. As a result, you have an entire religious population that has been radicalized. The conundrum here is that those same religious texts that call for violence against their neighbor also include passages that expect you to love and honor your neighbor. In the Bible, John 15, verse 12 and 13, "This is my commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends." The Quran, chapter 4, verse 36, "Serve God and join not any partners with him, and do good to parents, kinfolk, orphans, those in need, neighbors who are near, neighbors who are strangers, the companion by your side, the wayfarer, and what your right hand possess." In Leviticus 19, verse 18, "Love your neighbor as yourself." This is a central commandment of the Torah. People forget these commandments because they are significantly more difficult for human beings to engage in because of distrust and fear of others who are not like us. So, how do we move from this fear and distrust? Unfortunately, there's no easy answer. I believe many religions have been co-opted by bad actors who use the faith of people to further their own ends. If you remember in one of my previous presentations, I said approximately 10% of the population are independent thinkers, and I referred to this group of people as entrepreneurs. They are the ones who guide the other 90%. And when the 10% is using faith to control the 90 as a basis for following evil, reason and compassion don't even factor in. This is the case with much of the Muslim population. While most followers of Islam are not terrorists, they're also not against terrorists. Again, this is based on centuries of teaching that Jews and Christians are evil and should be killed. so they won't condemn these inhumane attacks and or rise up and fight against the terrorists that pervert God's law, even though their religious texts command it. You can see this because of the multiple Islamic states that are getting involved in this conflict, even though there is little to no benefit for them going to war against Israel. This puts Israel, all Jews, and Christians for that matter, in a dangerous and difficult position. So the only thing the Israelis and Americans can do is fight back and defeat this evil. And hopefully when the hostilities have ended, we will have prevailed. Maybe then, mainstream Muslims can unlearn their biases and learn to love their neighbor. This concludes today's presentation of Office of the Patriot. If you enjoy the content, please take the time to like, subscribe, and share my channel on your social media. It is appreciated. And as always, have a blessed day and stay safe out there.